Gary Harper joins me here today. You can learn what his team is up to. Head over to sharperbusiness.com, sharperbusiness.com. If you don't know Gary helps real estate investors scale their business and is one of the top coaches in this sector. So I really appreciate your time here.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Before we hit record, you were kind of throwing some stats at me regarding the number of real estate deals you've done. Would you mind summarizing that again for the audience and talk a little bit about regarding the scaling business? Because I would imagine that it sometimes seems like some of these niches that we fall into, more times than not, end up being accidental.
Yeah, for sure. My brother-in-law and I give a lot of credit to my brother-in-law. His name's Wayne. I call him kind of the OG. He's a little older in age now, but he got me involved in the 90s in real estate. He really got me involved in investing in general from I knew him since I married my sister when I was 12 and just got me understanding baseball cards and investing and stuff like that. But I didn't really realize how much he was preparing me for real estate and understanding assets. And then in the late 90s, I moved to Northwest Indiana where I would live in his houses and while rehabbing them with him. And so he kind of used me as a worker and such. And I would go from house to house and living in them. But it was like 2001 that I started really venturing out on my own to do it on my own. And so I was just looking for cash flows. I had a good corporate job. I had a good executive role. I was growing in my career. But it was probably 2001 to 2004, I started acquiring rentals. It's a good handful of rentals and had enough cash flow to really sustain me. Started my hand at fix and flip and things like that, probably 2006 to 2007. I started a property management company with my brother-in-law in 2006, 2007, 2008, sometime in that frame. And then if you've been in real estate as long as I have, Jack, that those years weren't very kind to an investor. They definitely weren't very kind to me and my brother-in-law. And so we lost everything. By 2010, I think every rental we had was upside down. And in Northwest Indiana, they reassessed taxes on top of that. So our escrows were upside down and payments were below, and I couldn't even cover the payment to the bank that I was getting from the renter. So it was not a good place. And then over leveraged on the houses, probably bought them wrong anyway. Loan to values were upside down. So all that to say is it left me with a real bad disdainment in my mouth for real estate. I filed bankruptcy in 2011 on real estate. I was like, this is not for me. But I got it a little bit different of a design in my life. And he actually, I come down Lyme disease, got bit by a tick and got debilitating, got really bad, really fast. And I'll be honest with you, at the end of 2011, could barely function. I was forced back into real estate. I had to walk away from a very successful corporate career. You see all the awards behind my head, and those were all from those years in corporate America and winning Executive of the Year awards and retention rewards and things like that. Forced back into real estate, something I didn't have a passion for, didn't love, but I did have a passion for taking care of my family. And so tried my hand at wholesale. I'm like, if I'm going to do this again, I'm going to get in and get out, right? I don't want to be holding this stuff and get upside down again. So our team got out and we started to work together, and my brother-in-law probably did 40, 50 deals that year without me. And then as I got healthier, we built a company to do about 300 deals a year until 2016. And we did it in 5 states, and some of it was virtual, and learned a lot from Larry Goins and some other guys in the industry back then, and Jason Medley, and a lot of good people that are in the industry today. I learned a lot from them. But we got to about 300 deals a year. And 2016, my phone started ringing. People started asking me for help. They were like, hey, how do you scale? How do you do what you guys have done? And my brother-in-law, he has a passion for real estate, but I don't know if he has as much passion for coaching other people. But, my world of corporate America and coaching businesses and this now true success we've got kind of came together that year. And I started traveling and helping people with their business and just giving them ideas on how to scale. Fast forward to the last couple of years, I've written frameworks and business books and things like that, helping entrepreneurs, and have A Purpose to Rise, which is the book about an real estate entrepreneur scaling their business. It's a fable, real fun book there. But that's been my journey. It's been a lot of failure, but a lot of lessons, and then applying that lessons with the failure to other people's success. And I think that's what I kind of bring to the table is experience. And I always tell people there's a big difference between teachers and coaches. Teachers provide knowledge. Coaches provide experience. And unfortunately, a lot of times we don't have a good experience if we haven't failed. And so That's what a little bit of my journey and like the numbers and what we've been able to accomplish. Now, I mean, we're 8 years, almost 9 years into Sharper business, and we've coached over 4,000 businesses in the last 9 years. So we've had a lot of success. We're in 9 countries. Worked with a lot of the top entrepreneurs over the years too. I've been very blessed to have the opportunity to work with people.
So, could you kind of break down what your mission is for Sharper Business? I always like to have a little clarity of that because it's interesting to see what you're targeting.
For me in 2011, when I got really sick, the doctor told me I had like 6 months left to live. The infection from Lyme got into my heart, my brain, all my organs. It was not a good situation. And I dropped a lot of weight. And I remember getting on my knees that year and asking God to give me my life back. And I said, God, if you'll give me my life back, I'll give it back to helping other people. And so Sharper's purpose in 2016, after I felt like I healed, I got financially responsible and healed there. I felt like our purpose was to do a good work by others while giving back to God's work. So that's our purpose. Our mission is to do a good work that supports God's work. By 2026, we want to be able to say that we gave $2.6 million to God's work while doing a good work helping other people. And so that's been my passion and my purpose ever since I started Sharper.
Why do you think operational clarity and scaling are such common challenges to real estate investors?
I think operational clarity starts with why you're doing it. So, like, if we're not clear on why we're doing it, we don't get a purpose. It's a recipe. Like scale, when somebody says I want to scale, is they want to be successful. Because somebody's definition of scale is so vastly different from one person to the next. I try to retool their mindset on scale to success. What does success look like for you? Even Harvard talks about the 5 stages of business, and the fifth stage being the success stage, right? That's the stage in which we achieve our purpose. And that's what scale is. Scale is achieving your purpose. Now, if your purpose is 10x, then that's what your purpose is. If your purpose is 1x, then that's what your purpose is. Your purpose is sustainability, then that's success. But we got to change our mindset to what scale is. And typically, let's define what success is to you. Now, once we have success defined, then we can back it up to drive from purpose to success. There's a roadmap from purpose to success. And the roadmap is very simple. It starts with purpose. Now, purpose, everyone confuses purpose and thinks purpose gives us this feel good. It's not, right? Purpose is the definition of why we're doing this. And it doesn't always have a feel to it, right? But we want to take that purpose and apply a feel to it, right? And that is what we call passion. And passion is different than purpose. Passion comes off of purpose. My purpose could be to grow grass. It could be as mundane as growing grass. But there should be a passion behind why I want to grow grass. Like maybe it makes a connection for me in time spent with my dad growing up, and how my dad used to win awards for having the best grass in the neighborhood. And he did. And in Fort Riley, Kansas, we got a little happy sign put on because my dad grew the best grass in the neighborhood, right? And so, like, I could get passionate about that, have a nice secured lawn because my dad was passionate about grass and it made a connection for me. But purpose creates passion when we do it and we like it and we enjoy it and we start to get good at it. We create an obsession, right? Passion creates an obsession for something. And then obsession creates success. People that hit levels of success is because they become obsessed about it. They become obsessed about achieving that success. And obsession can be a very good thing as long as it's rooted in the right reasons. If you're in a relationship with somebody, then you want to have a successful relationship, you better be obsessed about that person you're in a relationship with. And if you're obsessed about it, that means you're passionate about them. And you came together for a purpose. And so purpose creates passion, passion creates obsession, and obsession drives success. And that's what we have there. And so a company that's trying to scale, if they don't have that DNA of success, they're never going to scale properly. And that's what operational clarity gives us, right? It gives us clear purpose to success. And then we take that purpose and we use that to drive the rest of the operations, right? So from purpose, we create what we call a key purpose indicator. How are we going to measure the purpose? How are we going to measure if we're passionate? How are we going to measure if we're obsessed about it? And so I created in our Rise Business Framework, I've trademarked the 4 types of KPIs. The first one being your key purpose indicator. How are you measuring your purpose? Ours, to do a good work that supports God's work. How we measure that? Are we on track to give it $26 million by 2026? That's our purpose indicator. Now, from that, we go from purpose down into profit indicators. So how much money do we need to make, spend, and keep to fulfill our purpose? That's the profit indicators. So purpose creates profits and profits drive performance. How many houses do we got to sell in order to hit our profits, in order to fulfill our purpose? Then the most important metric in your business for scaling is the process indicator. What's your daily process indicators that you have to do every single day, Jack, that are going to get you to performance? And those performance are going to get you to profits. And the profits are going to do what? Fulfill your purpose, which is scale. And so when we build down from purpose and we measure up from process, that's where we take and create a scalable model that's sufficient and gives us operational clarity. Does that make sense? And so that process indicator, for example, for your listeners, like what is a process indicator, right? Most people, when they hear KPIs, they go key performance indicators, right? But that's just one category of KPI. The most important KPI is the key process indicator. So what is that? How many offers did you make? How many appointments did you line? How many comps did you run? How many projects are on time? How many projects are on budget? How many closings do I have with issues right now? Those are daily key process indicators. What do? They tell me the process is working. They tell me my acquisitions person made enough offers, or my disposition person got enough offers, or it tells me my TC is managing the process and we don't have any closing issues. It tells me that my project manager is doing what they need to do with time and money and budget. That tells me the process is working. Performance indicators are how many closings did I have? How much money did I make per closing? What's my average cost per qualified lead? Those are performance. And those things drive our profits, right? And so that's why we have to measure down or build down and measure up in business, and especially real estate, to scale properly. So it's a great question.
You could go in all kinds of directions, but what I think is really striking here is that you hear more and more there's riches in the niches, in the fact that you got to have a focus. And you sound like you're kind of coming at this as a passion drives these key purpose indicators.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how that might help focus the business and avoid distractions?
Yeah. And so that's what it is. The purpose indicator is our measurement. It's our filter, right? Like, so we got to look at it and go, does anything we're doing pull us away from our focus on that? And if it does, then we shouldn't do it, right? If going outside of our niche doesn't help us fulfill our purpose, if adding a new product doesn't help us fulfill our purpose, if hiring some people doesn't help us fulfill our purpose, we shouldn't do it. The purpose is always the filter for the organization. That filters the good ideas from the bad ideas. I always tell people focus is an acronym. It actually stands for something. It stands for follow one course until successful. Follow one course until successful. And so we can't hit success. We talked about what success is. We can't hit success if we're not focused, because following one course until successful is the route to success. Nobody ever accuses you of being obsessed when you try to do 8 different things, right? You can't create obsession if you're not passionate. And so when somebody tries to do multiple things, they got a purpose, but they don't ever get passionate about multiple things. And if you don't get passionate about multiple things, you're not getting obsessed about that one thing and getting there. And if you don't get obsessed about it, guess what? You're not going to get successful. And so that's why following one course until success allows you to do that, because obsession shows up when you're focused. You don't look at Michael Jordan. Was he successful in basketball when he tried to play baseball? No. He wasn't successful in baseball because he wasn't focused on baseball his whole life. He was focused on basketball his whole life, right? Could he play the game? Sure, he was good at it. Did he go further because of his name than most people? Absolutely. But he was never great at it. And he was never obsessed about it. When he became obsessed about basketball is when he became great at basketball. And when he focused on basketball, right? And that's the same thing we do as entrepreneurs. We fail to reach success because we fail to stay focused.
Another thing that you said that really struck me is regarding the key process indicators, I think is what you referred to them. And this was something that when we started doing our real estate investing, we worked off of a list of these are the money generating activities we needed to do. And we set our sights on, we had to earn 100 points a day.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just convinced that if these are the things we worked on, that would generate X results.
Yeah.
Do you find that a lot of real estate investors don't go through that process or they don't tackle it in that way?
Not really. I mean, they don't apply the accountability needed to the process to get it to get the results. So it's not that they don't know. Like most of the time, I find entrepreneurs, especially real estate, will look at something like I need to make 10 offers a day, or I need to go have 100 phone calls, right? And I found like 100 leads, create 20 qualified leads, you create 10 appointments, you get us 2 contracts, right? That's process indicators to getting the results of contracts. So it's like they know the numbers. The problem is they don't apply the accountability to the numbers. They don't have the accountability on a daily basis. And the problem with that is this: 3 days of 5, you don't get your daily process indicators, you could affect up to 3 weeks of performance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the danger. We could destroy a whole quarter.
Right.
So it's why it's so important not only to know that 100 points that you had, but like, what are you doing when you don't hit it? In Rise, we have what we call the Systems 60s meeting. It's a 60-minute systems meeting that we go and we focus on any process that process indicator said it wasn't working. McDonald's did this. They taught us this in business. If you watch the movie Founder, McDonald's brothers go out to a tennis court and they said, well, we got to redesign our kitchen. We got to redesign our system, this process of how we make hamburgers. You know why, Jack? Because they said the process indicator of serving a hamburger in 60 seconds versus 60 minutes is what they needed to achieve. Why? Because their purpose was to serve 1 billion people. So they had to have enough stores, profit indicators to build all these stores to serve 1 billion. The process had to be 30 seconds in order to produce enough to perform, to make enough money to make it worth the while to serve 1 billion. And so they went out to the tennis court and redesigned their kitchen 3 different times to get the process down to 30 seconds. And they called it the Speedy system. And now every fast food restaurant's used it ever since. Why? Because somebody decided the process indicator needed to be held accountable. And business forever changed in fast food in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they're so important. And real estate entrepreneurs, like most of the time, they know the number. They know what they got to do every day. Question is, are they creating accountability around it?
Yeah, I'm always just surprised how many people, they seem very busy. There's always something to do. And then when you ask, well, what did you do today? They're busy designing their next mailing or something that actually isn't going to be directly related to what the goal is.
And that's what happens, right? We get busy doing stuff that doesn't help us fulfill purpose. And so the step we miss is not designing the process based around the purpose of what we're trying to achieve, what our goals are. So then we get busy, and I call that unproductive time. Productivity has to happen when value and essential come together, right? So every process we do has to be measured with, does this bring value to our customer, internal or external? And is it essential to my business? In other words, essential to reaching my purpose. And if it doesn't bring value and it's not essential, it's not productive. And we should stop doing it.
If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor, share this with one of your investor friends. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. So Gary, you've likely have seen some patterns here now. Can you give us some common barriers you've seen holding real estate in businesses back from scaling? and how to overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I often refer back to patterns as wisdom. Somebody says you're wise, that person's wise. Wisdom is just the ability to see patterns, right? I mean, that's what creates wisdom. We've been around long enough. I got enough gray hair now to see enough patterns to see what's going on. And we're coaching. I think I have 9 business coaches today out coaching today around the country, or actually around the world. We're in 9 different countries. And there's very definite patterns for sure. Like, one of the things that's not in our control is just the market in general, the ever changing market of real estate. And so not being willing to adjust your marketing and your business every 90 days is definitely a detriment to some entrepreneur. Marketing in real estate vastly change quarter to quarter. So not measuring that, not knowing your return on ad spend and what you're spending and what the return has been for that spend, and then adjusting. And then I call them research R&D ponds, marketing R&D ponds, where you should have 3 major things that it's working for you right now in real estate, that you're generating leads and marketing. It's one of the biggest problems of real estate entrepreneurs have right now is just getting inventory. Now, opposite side of that is we should have a couple R&D ponds that we're dropping a little bit of money in and testing at all times, so that one of these main 3 stop working, we have something we can pull in its place, right? And I don't like entrepreneurs that be lower than their 3 ROAS, right? A 3 times their ad spend or their cost to get the money. So that's one thing. The probably more predominant reason why, if somebody gets that part of the business figured out, they don't scale. And this is a hard fact to realize, is people, right? The people of the business are one of the biggest factors to why we don't grow properly. And the truth is, Jack, at the end of the day, sometimes those people are the leaders. It's the owner of the business. They're not a good leader. Just because you're good at doing deals doesn't mean you're going to be good at running a business. And so a lot of the reasons why we see people don't scale is because they're in their own way. They're not a good leader. I made this statement, said a couple of times, but people have the teams they deserve. If you don't like your team, then you got to look in the mirror. If you don't like what the mirror showing you, change the reflection, right? Like, at the end of the day, you have the team you deserve. And if you're a crappy leader, then you're going to have a crappy team. It's just what it is. There's not a coach in this world that can come in and fix your team if you're not willing to be a better leader. Right? So we have to be willing to be better leaders and know the difference between leadership and management. They're not the same. Leaders inspire people. Managers drive results. And so a lot of entrepreneurs aren't good at one of those two. And they say, well, I'm just not a good leader. But I'm like, most of the time, Jack, I find that they're good leaders. They're bad managers. Right? And that's a big difference. Managers create accountability. They drive the results. They have tenacity. Leaders don't have that. Most of them don't want to be held accountable themselves. Why would they want to hold somebody else accountable? They walked away from corporate America or jobs because they're like, I don't want accountability. So then it's like, but the business needs accountability. The daily KPIs, the key process indicators, have to be held accountable. And if we don't naturally have that and want that, then that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to hold somebody else accountable. That feels nasty. It feels terrible. Why would I do that to you? I don't want it done to me. But that doesn't mean that the business doesn't need it. So if you're not a natural manager, then you probably need to go find somebody that does that job well. I studied Carnegie and Frick, man that wrote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's Carnegie. You know who Frick is? Frick is not good. I mean, there's a reason why we have the slang term, what the frick. All right. He hired a militia to go after everybody that went on strike in his companies. That was Carnegie's manager, if you will, his integrator, if you will, right? So we have to have a combination of inspiration and accountability. It's rare that I find an entrepreneur that has both, right? And so if you're struggling in one of those areas, you got to get that figured out. Last is process. People are borrowing, especially in real estate. I think it's one of the worst business models when someone goes and takes somebody else's business processes and says, I'm going to copy that guru. I'm going to copy the way they do it because the way they do it is successful. The problem with it, though, is the real estate market shifts a lot. And when it shifts, you got to wait for the person you learn from or you copy their system to figure it out before you figure it out. Because you didn't design it based on the way you do it. You designed it based on the way they do it. And if it stops working for them, guess what? It's going to stop working for you. You know how many people I've seen go out of business because they're sitting there waiting. While the person they learn how to run the business from is already out for figuring out a new way to do it. And you don't hear that person get on the radio waves and get on the podcasts and get on social media and say, hey, it's not working for me right now, so stop buying my program until I figure it out. They just keep selling the program. And then what happens is they figure it out. And then you hear them go, I got a new way of doing it. You got to buy my new program. What? Why? Because they've already went out and shifted because the market shifted. And in the meantime, you're stuck in the flux trying to figure it out. You're not making money. Maybe you go out of business. Maybe you lose it all. And so I think those are the three things, right? Number one is know how to get your product, know how to market, know how to sell. Because here's the thing, if you're not making money, you don't own a business anyway. But now we got that and that's solidified and we know where to get a product, we know how to buy and sell. Now we have a business. In order to build a business, you have to lead it properly. You have to manage it properly. And if you don't lead it and manage it properly, now you better make sure your process is just sustaining your company for growth. Right? You got the right people, set the right seats in the organization as you will. And I think that's the key. I mean, so first is going back to your statement about how do we scale? Well, we scale based on what our success looks like. And we scale because we get a purpose that creates a passion and we become obsessed about winning. And then winning drives us to our success. But then we got to like have the business run properly. And marketing and sales are an important part of that. Once we have that, now we can build a model with leadership and management. And then have the design process, procedures, and policies that are sustainable for growth. And that's what takes it. And listen, this is all super simple. Crazy thing about business, Jack, is it's not hard, right? Super simple. And at times, just not easy. Heck, might do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
But it doesn't mean it has to be overcomplicated. And successful Army, 21 years, passed away now. But you know that man used to tell me, he's drill sergeant. He said, Gary, just kiss it. He said, keep this super simple. Matter of fact, back in the day, he wouldn't say that. As he got older, he's saying that it's super simple. When I was younger, he'd look at me, he's like, Gary, keep it simple. Stupid. That's what he would tell me. And he'd pause every time. Keep it simple. Stupid. And that's what we got to do in business. We got to keep it super simple.
On your homepage of your website, you talk about the growth ceiling. Can you talk a little bit about that and what we have to do to break through that?
Yeah, everybody hits ceilings, man. We all hit ceilings. It's a constant state of adjustments. That's what breaking through a ceiling looks like. We got to be on a constant state of adjustments. And in order to do that, you have to have some type of rhythm that keeps you adjusting your business. And that's what those KPIs do for us. The process indicator tells us when to adjust the process. The performance indicators tell us when to adjust the people. The profit indicator tells us when to adjust the strategy. And the purpose indicator tells us when to adjust us, right? Either the process isn't working anymore, it's become immune, and we have to adjust that process. It's like going to the chiropractor and getting an adjustment. I like to tell a story about my son. When he was 13 years old, he was 5'3". He's 6'1" now. But at 5'3", like he wanted to be in the basketball team and all his friends were growing past him. You know what? He got stuck. Like his body wasn't growing. We go through growth spurts naturally and as humans, but like our business doesn't go through a growth spurt without an adjustment. And so I took him to the chiropractor because he was complaining of his back hurting a lot. And I walk in and she sits down and she says, hey, have you noticed something about Jay? And I said, what? And she said, you notice how long his arms are and how long his legs are? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, what, unproportionately long compared to his torso. And she said, you ever noticed that? I said, yeah, we just do what all good parents do. And she's like, what's that? So we made fun of him. We called him Granddaddy Long Legs, the spider monkey. I mean, literally, legitimately, that's what, I mean, I'm paying for it now on the couch somewhere, I'm sure, with a chiropractor, yeah, a psychiatrist. Like, we kind of big on him. And she's like, well, let me tell you what's going on. His growth plate, he's growing his backbone, he's starting to get some curvature in his spine. It's not growing properly. And so his torso's not expanding, right? She's like, what I got to do is I got to adjust him. You're going to have to come in 3 or 4 times a week. We're going to have to make the adjustments. And would you believe, Jack, from like October to Christmas, he grew like 5 inches. How fast he grew. You know, and now he's taller than me. I'm only 5'7". He's like 6'1". Now he comes up, puts his hands on my shoulder and looks down. And I mean, he's like, hey, Dad, maybe you need to go to the chiropractor. It's kind of like payback for all the years of me calling him Spider Monkey. But what has to happen to grow? You have to get adjustments. And so like a business coach, like Sharper Business Solutions, helps you make those adjustments properly so that you grow properly. Right. And I think that's the important part, is knowing someone who has the right experience, the right ability, the right wisdom, the right seeing these patterns to look at you and say, listen, there's something wrong here. Have you noticed it? You're like, well, I knew something wasn't right. Well, let's make this adjustment. And making the adjustments helps us grow and grow past those ceilings.
Going back to something you said earlier, some people, it's rare to find somebody who's a good leader and a good manager. Unfortunately, I think as entrepreneurs and business owners, we're not very honest with ourselves which of these categories we fall into. Can you kind of give us an idea, like a quick test, so we can be honest with ourselves and where we might need the help?
It's a really simple question, which is, where do you get energy? Do you get energy when you inspire people and get them excited about the goals and where we're going? Or do you get energy when you get the result? Because if you get energy when you get results, you're a manager. If you get energy when you inspire, you're casting the vision and you're setting the goals, you're telling everybody the potential, then it's leadership. And that's the difference, right? Like, leaders inspire, managers drive results. So it's like, at what moment are you getting energy? Are you getting it? And that's the one thing that I tell people is, like, you got to understand the disconnect between a good leader and employees. Leaders are like, at the end of the quarterly session, they're like, all right, this is good. This is exciting. This is what we're going to do this year. What? And the employees are like, just haven't bought into this yet. Right? When do they get excited? At the end of the year. The managers and employees go, we got the results. And then they come back to you, Jack, and they're like, high five, bro. We get the results. You're like, that's what we said we were going to do. And you're like, but we did. Like, what are we doing next? That's where I'm going to get excited again. So it's always about, leaders are excited about what's to come. Managers are excited about what we did.
Sure.
So that's the easiest way to measure. Now, I have a leadership and management assessment that I do with people. It's 20 questions each. And then answering those questions, you get a high score of 60. And if you get something below 50, then you probably got some work to do. If you get below 40, you got some significant work to do. If you get below 30, I probably recommend you don't be a manager or a leader.
It sounds like there's a lot of mindset shifting that has to occur, because you mentioned that change is painful. And how many times have you run into entrepreneurs who are just fearful of that next step?
Well, I always tell people the top 4 reasons we don't grow, like that we don't ever get a purpose, passion that drives the session. Number 1 is fear, right? And so the whole reason I've written 6 books, the whole reason why I have a curriculum, the whole reason why I get on podcasts is to replace fear with knowledge. That's the only way you get rid of fear. Like, you could say that this podcast is a fear reducer because it's knowledge. Like COVID, it was a prime example of how we get rid of fear. 2020. I guarantee you, in March of 2020, most of your listeners were like, I'm going to stay home for a couple of weeks. Right? But as time grew and the more knowledge we had on the virus and when the more knowledge we gained by going through it all, what happens? Fear dissipates. I'm going to get on a plane today. I'm going to York, Pennsylvania to work with a guy named Eric Brewer. I'm telling you, he doesn't have any fear right now of the COVID. He's not going to be in a mask. And most of the people that are on the plane, they aren't going to have a mask on anymore either. But in 2020, I was wearing a mask. Not only was it mandated, but like people wanted to because they were fearful of getting sick. And listen, there's people listening to your podcast right now, and they're like, man, I never wore a mask. Well, it's still fear. Congratulations, you still had a fear. You know what you had a fear of? Control. Fear of the sickness or fear of control. One of the two is still driving your decisions. So we have to replace fear with knowledge. It's just sustain it with faith. Number 2 reason why people don't grow is mindset. Fear and mindset are not the same thing. There are people that legitimately overcome their fear with knowledge, and they know they've been around a while. They know what they got to do, but they're not willing to change their mindset to go do it. They're not willing to adjust. They're not willing to let go. They're not willing to work on their weaknesses. That's mindset. And if they're not willing to make those adjustments, they're going to fail. Third is connections. Like Shark Tank, for example, one of the best shows ever created for an entrepreneur. Why? It makes connections for people. But last is systems and processes, which is why I wrote the Rise Business Framework. How do we build the systems and processes to scale this business? But I'll tell you, Jack, all the time, I tell people, listen, if you're not willing to overcome fear, if you're not willing to adjust your mindset, if you're not willing to get out and make connections, it doesn't matter what I implement in your company at this point. It's not going to work. So
Mhm.
people have to overcome fear. They have to be willing to adjust the mindset. They got to be willing to get out and make connections. And then they got to be willing to implement the right systems and processes in their business to grow properly.
And with all of that being said, we still see a handful of people walking around with masks.
Right? Yeah. Because there's still fear. You know why? Because they refuse to listen to the knowledge. They refuse to. They are just at a point of being a victim to their fear. That's just what it is. Just knowledge is available doesn't mean people listen. We are in an information age. Like, this is the
Mhm.
most information you could get in your world. Like, people should not be fearful where we are in the world right now because there's so much information. The problem is, do you believe it? Do you believe the information that's available to you? And so that's where it comes into play. And so people allow the fear to continue to cripple them because they don't want to believe the information. I told somebody the other day, they called us to hire us. I'm like, listen, don't pay for information. Information's free. Like, well, I just want to get information. I'm like, well, don't hire me then. Like, why? I got a book. Read my book. That's information. Listen to a podcast. That's information. And there's tons of them. Experience. That's what you pay for. Right?
Mhm.
ChatGPT doesn't give experience. It gives information. But it doesn't have feeling, at least not yet. Right? Well, AI might change at some point. But wisdom, right? That's what you pay for.
Mhm.
Big difference.
Well, Gary, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to direct everybody to your website again, sharperbusiness.com. Before we jump into the rapid fire questions and close out this episode, is there anything we should have hit on today?
I think there's so much to unpack here. And I think at the end of the day, these are really good starting conversational points for somebody that's out there at any stage of business, whether they're starting up today or they're seasoned at this. One of the topics we talked today should be able to touch every listener. And I hope it brings them value.
Well, I can definitely believe that that's the case. This has been really insightful. If you're ready, Gary, we'll jump into these and then we'll call this episode good.
That's it.
What lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
That they can do it all themselves.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Trust and verify.
Do you have a book recommendation?
The Rise Business Framework.
That's fair.
Yeah.
What single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact to you or your business?
AI has very much revolutionized productivity in my company. I try to find an AI solution for it.
One last time, sharperbusiness.com. I really appreciate your time, Gary. This is just fantastic.
Of course I would. You've been fun and this has been great.